get moving.
Sounds great.
Okay, so first is self-identification. So any members having potential conflict should self-identify at this time. Okay.
Dave Fleischer, Brighton Center.
Anyone else? All right, we'll move along then. First, I need a motion to approve the minutes from our February 19th meeting.
So moved, Carissa.
Second, Connie Schnell.
We got a motion and a second for the February minutes. Any discussion or questions or modifications to those minutes? All right, hearing none. All in favor to adopt the minutes from February 19th? Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, minutes are approved. We'll move into the programming portion of our agenda, and I think Jason's going to start with talking about our approach to employer support and business services.
Correct.
Aye.
Oh, what's that? Somebody just joined? Okay. Oh, okay, great, awesome. We had an individual in the waiting room. Looks like Janet's joining us. So thank you, Andy. We wanted to share what we felt to be some pretty pertinent programming updates with you all. And then there's one subject in particular we wanted to get feedback from you on. And more on that in just a few moments. The first thing that I wanted to share with you is just to kind of reiterate some of the items that we had shared and possibly bring you up to speed on how we're continuing to provide employer support and business services in a virtual format to our customers. We know that this virtual format was really something that we were propelled into back in the middle of March due to the pandemic. And so we've made some very swift but intentional actions in terms of addressing the needs of employers during this time. And so I'm not going to read all of this to you, but I'll share a few highlights. So in addition to the virtual team member or the virtual services and the team members that have been providing those services, many of them have continued to work in a telecommuting fashion, but have also since that time, since the last time we were together, we've seen kind of a transition of some team members having more of a hybrid schedule where they're working in a telecommuting format, but also coming into the career centers. So our WIOA team members and our Brighton Center team members are examples of some of those hybrid formats. And then even from a WIB staff perspective, I think Tara was the first one to kind of start that hybrid schedule herself. And then a few others are following. So it's as businesses are continuing to reopen and the economy is starting to reopen as well, we're responding accordingly, but with also the mindset of keeping safety and health in mind for our staff and our customers. I want to continue to draw your attention to our local website as well, because the nkcareercenter.org website continues to have ongoing updates. I think Katie Jo is in it daily, probably multiple times a day, making sure that in particular 3 areas of the website, so the COVID-19 updates, the unemployment insurance updates, and the job search marketplace are updated with the latest info that we have available. And so I would encourage you to check that information out if you have some time. We're continuing to, in addition to the online engagement with our customers, we still have the option for customers to reach out via phone as well. The vast majority of these calls, as you can imagine, are related to unemployment insurance. We have updated our contact page to make it a little bit more friendly to reach out to our team members based on specific categories or functions and versus partners or organization. And then staff are continuing to help triage unemployment insurance calls when possible. And I won't steal any thunder from Ellen, but I think she's going to talk later about just some updates on our Facebook Live events. We started launching weekly events back in April, and I think we've expanded those offerings to 2 each week, with a focus on employers and then also job seekers and partners. But more to come on that. I want Ellen to be able to expand on that later. And then in terms of continuing our employer support efforts, we are really focusing on helping the businesses not only with resources that have come down from either at the state level or the federal level, but also connecting them to rapid response, which is really the services that we offer to employers that are experiencing workforce reductions or layoffs. And the notification of those layoffs tend to occur through what they call WARN, which is a worker adjustment retraining notification. And it's a type of a letter that the employer submits indicating a potential layoff is going to occur. And then ideally the employer provides kind of a breakdown of how many individuals are impacted, and even more ideally, they provide a breakdown of the specific positions that are affected within that layoff, the job titles, how many individuals are within those job titles, and the like. What we've seen are a significant increase in those WARN notices compared to this time last year. I think this time last year we had probably a few hundred affected workers that were impacted by layoffs. And I think now we're approaching to the tune of around 2,000 affected workers that are impacted. So the other thing I wanted to mention I think is really important is that the majority of these WARN notices until just recently have indicated that the intention is for the employer to bring these individuals back to work once the economy is fully open. And so in doing that, normally what we would do, what our business services team would do is reach out to those employers immediately and offer the opportunity for us to engage with their affected workers, provide them with information on employment resources to get them transitioning back to a different job. And other types of supportive services. But a lot of the employers are hesitant to have our team do that because they're optimistic or that they can have those employees return to work with them. So that's a lot of the feedback we've had. We have been able to hold a few rapid response sessions virtually with companies and some affected workers. And we will likely hear a little bit more about that from Ellen and her update in just a few moments. But we are paying very attention to those trends. We got a little chat message from Rhonda about audio. Are any of you experiencing audio issues on your end as well?
Yeah, it's a little choppy, Jason. I'm not too sure why that is. If is that audio choppiness just coming from Jason or from all speakers?
So, Andy, when you just spoke, I don't hear it, but when Jason, this is Connie, when Jason was, I heard it.
Same
Thank
here, Andy.
Yep.
I closed this one. It might have been this one. So, oh, okay. So turn.
Jason, are you turning into a robot and not telling us?
Maybe.
Okay.
We're thinking there may be some feedback issues between the different devices that we have.
It was sounding better already.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. How is that?
Much better.
Enter the cliche. Can you hear me now?
Yes, got it.
Okay, great. Well, my apologies. Thank you. I think it was Rhonda who mentioned that in her chat. So thank you for mentioning that. Please let us know if there are any additional audio issues so we can work to correct those. And again, we appreciate your patience, everyone. So again, this is just a little bit of a reiteration of what we had talked about when we were together at our last meeting, but we thought it was good just as a refresher to share this information. And the next topic is also related to programming that we wanted to share with this group as well. You know, since actually the middle of March 17th, when the governor had issued an executive order regarding state-owned and leased offices across Kentucky discontinuing their in-person services. Our Kentucky Career Centers across the state align themselves under that order in each area. And so although the Career Centers have been continuing to offer virtual services and that part in terms of the business related to providing those services to job seekers and employers has continued, the in-person operation of our services has not reopened as of yet. So I also wanted to mention that's the scenario in all of 10 workforce areas in Kentucky. And then Ohio and Indiana, which operate differently from Kentucky on a number of ways, but in workforce as well, are actually operating in a similar fashion. Some offices are open, some of them are offering limited services, and then I think all of the career centers in Indiana are still closed. And so we're not necessarily an anomaly compared to what we're seeing in our tri-state. So the conversation about in-person services has really been a very strategic conversation that's been happening between the WIB staff, and Tara's been really right in the mix of that in terms of making sure that when in-person services resume, that we have all of the optimal safety and health measurements in place. And so our Career Center team of partners and the leadership team of those partners have been really communicating weekly, almost daily on this topic to make sure that we are making all preparations. The state has not given us any specific guidance at this point as to when they recommend we reopen the Career Centers. They, in fact, have kind of bounced that ball back to us locals to make those recommendations and have the ability or flexibility to make those calls. But we do have some concerns, and I just mentioned in these bullet points, our top concerns include really the continued backlog of unemployment claims that have reached around 50,000. Some of these claims are going back to March when individuals first applied. And because of those claims, we know that customers are, if they have not received payment, and yet they've been determined eligible for unemployment insurance, understandably, those customers are extremely frustrated. And because of the sheer volume of those customers, and coupled with the fact that the state has not hired any additional full-time staff members to help with providing in-person unemployment insurance assistance, that is really a top concern if and when we're to reopen those in-person services. Reflecting back to 2008, 2009, when we had the Great Recession, at that time, when we had I think at its peak, a 12% unemployment rate, we had lines wrapped around the building, 6 or 7 hour wait times to speak with someone to address an unemployment insurance claim issue. And that was back in 2008, 2009. And so those of us who recall those times know that back then, the biggest difference, well, the two biggest differences were, the economy and also social distancing. Those requirements were not something that we had in place at that time or were required to maintain the safety and health of our staff and customers. So that brings us to our next concern, is obviously making sure that the health and the environment for our staff and for our customers remains to be safe and secure and optimal in terms of just creating an environment that supports the healthiness of our staff and customers. And so that's a big component. And then that last bullet point in terms of just overall staff capacity and customer flow, it does kind of tie into what I mentioned earlier about the backlog of unemployment claims, the lack of staff from the state to help out with those in-person claims. And by the way, in 2008, 2009, when the lines were wrapped around the building at that time, the state had more than double the amount of unemployment insurance representatives to help with in-person claims at that time than they do today. So those being our top concerns are the leadership team, the WIB staff, the KCC leadership team are taking this topic very seriously. Our local career centers we're equipping them with all of the CDC recommended supplies and equipment, personal protective equipment, gloves, masks, and the like, sanitizing stations, plexiglass panels. We're setting up a type of once we have the ability to reopen, we're going to set up a curbside service system. We're going to have an appointment only feature. We're going to have to maintain a reduced occupancy in the building in our resource room, but virtual services will continue to be offered as well. And so we did also receive some additional info from the Education and Workforce Cabinet indicating that they are committing to providing security personnel at some of the larger locations, which for us would include Covington. They also mentioned a possibility of it including Florence as well. So although we don't have a specific date, our potential date for resuming in-person services or a time frame, we're thinking around August of 2020. We're looking at opportunities to possibly align that with school calendars when they start opening up. I know NKU just announced I believe August 17th is their start date. So we'll be watching the county school systems and the local school systems when they start releasing their calendars. But we just wanted to share it with this group because we know that it's a topic that we're certainly talking about frequently. We know that there's some activity that's happened in Frankfurt over the past couple of days, in regards to unemployment insurance and some protesting. And so we just want to be prepared if and when that time comes, but also be very realistic and protective of the health and safety of our staff and customers. So I threw a lot of information at you. Do any of you have any questions or feedback on this information?
Questions for Jason? All right. Thank you, Jason. I know that this is a difficult balance. You have a lot of important services that need to be provided, and given the timing of it, sounds like you don't want to be overrun, which could create a health concern. So sounds like you all are working hard on it, and if there's anything we can do as a board, just reach out.
Sure thing.
With that, I think we're going to return to the discussion of the employer resource guide. We've spoken about this in previous meetings. It's an effort by a number of different folks to come together and provide resource guide for our employers in our region. At this point, who should be giving the update here? Is this Jason or Corey?
This is me. I'll give this update.
Okay.
Andy, thank you.
Yep.
So we've touched on this topic a number of times in a few of these meetings as we've gotten together. Just to give some brief background, this initiative has really spun off from lots of conversations and takeaways that we've had through GROW, Northern Kentucky, and specifically Pillar 3 and the Employer Partner Roundtable. In talking with our employer partners, our workforce partners, we've been recognizing the need to have really a central hub of resources for employers to easily access. And that was really focused on functions or specific resource categories versus agencies and organizations. And being able to have the ability to reach out regarding those functions to make sure that the employers have somewhat of a streamlined approach in doing so. So last year, this initiative was really launched, and we had some kind of unofficial phases that took place, with phase 1 really focusing on, okay, we know that this needs to be in a digital format. We know that it needs to be mobile friendly. And so if we have it in the form of a website, who's going to host? What entity is going to host that site? And then how are we going to build and compile those categories of the resources that we're going to offer? And so in doing that, we have identified that the host of the site, and this was through a lot of discussion with not only the Pillar 3 and the Employer Partner Roundtable, but also in discussion with Tara from a WIB perspective. And so we have identified and approved that the WIB will host the site on the nkcareercenter.org site. And so that site is obviously digital, but it's also mobile friendly. And so that will allow us to have kind of that hub of this employer resource guide in a digital format where there will be categories of these resources and also subcategories. And we'll try to show you a quick demo of what that looks like as this template is really still in testing but being built. So the next phase, which is in progress, which we plan to have completed by August, or the end of August rather, is for us to get some feedback from you all about what this guide looks like. Not just the guide itself, but maybe the concept of the guide. Do we find it helpful? Do you find the site that we have in place right now intuitive, and is it attractive and effective? Really, any feedback is going to be valuable from this group, because we consider this group to be really our not just our business services committee, but our business advisory committee. And then we're also going to move forward with the workforce partners that are actually providing these services or functions. They're gonna help provide us with the content of exactly what these functions and services are, and help us keep that information up to date. There's going to be contact information and opportunity for employers to directly contact specific individual business services reps, employer reps, based on the function that they're seeking or the service that they're seeking. And then one of the other key points about this employer resource guide was who is going to be the gatekeeper, or some say the air traffic controller, of this content and guide, because we know from past experience when we've created, and some of you may remember back when there was the Employers First consortium between the Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana, and the workforce areas from those from southeastern Indiana, southwestern Ohio, and northern Kentucky. And that resource guide was released in 2013, and it was in a paper format. And so shortly after it was released, we realized that it was quickly outdated. And so having this format in a more digital setting is going to allow us the opportunity to regularly update the info and monitor and track that content to make sure that it's still relevant, and address any issues going forward. So we are still, I think we're final confirming that. I don't, kind of looking at Tara, because we've been talking about some things today about that. Okay, so we are really pleased to mention, and I think Katie Jo is on this call as well. Awesome. So we wanted to mention that Katie Jo is going to be helping us serve once we have the content in place, and once we have the approval from this group, but also from other potential focus groups, and we're ready to launch the site. Katie Jo is actually going to help us in serving as that gatekeeper or air traffic controller to help us maintain this guide and make sure that the information and content stay updated and relevant and correct. And so I'm really pleased about that, and thank Tara and Katie Jo for their support with that effort, because that was really a big component that we were really concerned about. We can launch something any day, but if there's not a type of an infrastructure to support it and prop it up going forward, then that's really going to be something that will likely fail in the future. But this will help us have that support moving forward. So that's really great news. that I wanted to mention. And so after some feedback from you all today, and then taking some additional review opportunities to other focus groups like SHRM, once we have the content in place in this guide, we'd like you to take another look at it in August.
And we do have a question from the group.
Oh, great.
In the chat.
And we have a question.
Read it if you want.
Absolutely.
Rhonda asks,
Can everyone hear Tara?
just hear me okay? I can speak up.
Yeah, speak
Yeah,
up.
I can speak up. Rhonda just mentioned that she likes the idea of the focus groups to provide input on the employer resource guide. And can you have an opportunity to include your companies with, she would be interested in tapping one of Duke's HR partners as an example.
Okay.
And then there's another question from Rhonda. Are there any other Kentucky WIBs or Southwest WIBs that have something similar from which we can benchmark?
That's a terrific question. So I think in terms of the question about what Ohio and Kentucky or Indiana are utilizing, so we did talk about that, and I think Corey, if you're on the line, feel free to chime in about this, because I know this was a topic of discussion that we talked about with GROW and Pillar 3 in terms of, in the employer partner roundtable, with everything happening on the Cincinnati side of the river or over in Indiana, we know that there may be opportunities to expand this. But I believe the team from Northern Kentucky felt that there was a significant amount of value localizing it to Northern Kentucky, but not necessarily, so specializing in Northern Kentucky, but not necessarily omitting anything from the entire greater Cincinnati area. So Corey, if you're on, I don't know if you have anything to add to that point.
No, I think that's exactly where we landed, Jason. Not to intentionally exclude Ohio necessarily, but to focus on Kentucky first, Kentucky resources, and then go from there, as to not delay any launch of the guide.
Okay. And then in terms of monitoring the resources or the
like modeling what any of those other WIBs have been doing.
Gotcha. So Corey, in those discussions, and thank you for that interjection, can you elaborate on anything any takeaways from Pillar 3 or the partner roundtable about any analysis of what's been done over in Ohio or Indiana as use of a potential model for this or inspiration for this project? I think that was part of Rhonda's question as well.
No, we actually didn't look into Ohio products that much. I think maybe Trish Mahabir brought up that there may be something happening on the Ohio side of the river that's comparable, but we honestly didn't really have a good example to look at that we knew of.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks, Corey. So on your screen, you should see the employer resource guide page. So this is the test site. Although if you wanted to go to it on your own, you're welcome to do that. Just type in nkcareercenter.org/ERG. And it's a fairly clean, simplistic approach. And we have it broken down by 4 main categories. But as you click on these categories, there is an expansion into some subcategories. And so once the content is provided and assembled, the content provided from the workforce partners and then assembled by our team, we're going to be populating that content here as these resources and the content gets provided to us. And so you see these subcategories underneath, for example, the candidate recruitment section. And then you see also the option to connect directly to an employer services representative. We actually made that category an option in all of the main categories in the event that the employer just wanted to connect with someone, a human being, to get started on whatever project they were working on. or would like assistance with. So we wanted to get your feedback today. In terms of formal action, we're not asking for formal action today on this project, but we will come back to you in August to really have more of a formal thumbs up on this project to allow us to really officially launch it. What are some of your thoughts and feedback? I'm really ready to stop talking and interested in your feedback.
Question from Dave Fleischer.
So I think that, Dave, you're on the line. You have a question about how this relates to Pillar 2?
I do. Jason and Corey, just as I was looking at the last page, the resource guide, and you were going down through the forms that kind of open up when you click on them, I'm wondering if under the internships or the apprenticeships, if there will be an opportunity for Pillar 2 to lodge their platform for an automatic OJT or work-based learning opportunity for these employers.
I think that is a perfect opportunity to have that option and resource listed under that subcategory, Dave. I think that's a terrific idea. Corey, do you have anything else to add about that?
No, I would agree, and we've had conversations with John Baines about the platform and the software that they're working on, and that's exciting. So yeah, I absolutely think it could live under the apprenticeship tab there, a link to that platform.
So do we need to champion that, or do you think that it's already within the plan?
I think once that's ready to go, I think this is going to be always a work in progress as new resources get introduced. And so when that, I think it's called the Rare Bird software that they're working on, once that's underway, I think then we'll have a conversation about essentially adding a link to that opportunity for employers under our apprenticeship section.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks for sharing.
So, Jason, this is Andy. I don't want to cut off discussion here if there are other thoughts that the committee has, but something that comes to mind in a reaction to Rhonda's comment, would it be appropriate to send, is this a link that you can send to the full committee?
Yes.
And maybe give us some time while we're not trying to toggle back and forth between the Zoom and look through it, and then provide, if you send it out, give us a deadline of a week or so to provide you with some feedback. And then maybe we could even share that within our organizations with our HR folks to provide some feedback in a little bit more maybe constructive way, if that works for you, or if that works for the committee. Open it up. Any other thoughts on the committee about providing feedback to the resource guide?
I like that, Andy. And just going back to a comment that Corey made, Trish, I'm working with the same work group that she's on it's really more of a regional approach, but it's very similar work that we're doing with Lumina and the Talent Hub. So I think kind of how we're discussing Dave's comment about the apprenticeship and linking in, and to the overall comment that Jason made about that this will be an ongoing, living, breathing website, I think that these expansions will continue. So I think to build capacity in the beginning and thinking that way, even though we may not be ready for the exact linkage at this point, is smart. So I would welcome the opportunity to look at it more closely, and also to get Trish's input as well, if that would be okay.
Great. So sounds like our next step here, again, any other comments? We will have staff send out the link to the site, to the guide, understanding that in some respects it's a shell for information to be inserted into. Other thoughts?
I'm sorry. Andy.
Yeah, good, Dave, go.
I just had one other thought that I don't know if Corey or Jason brought this up, but the admin for the resource guide, who's going to be the keeper of the gates, and do we have the ability to maintain this? There's a lot of different drop downs, and if everybody said go,
Yep.
that's a lot of work.
So that's an excellent question, Dave. And we did mention, we didn't spend a whole lot of time on this topic, but we did mention early on in this discussion that we did. Well, first of all, your point is well taken, and it was my primary concern. It was Tara's. I know Tara's concern from the beginning of this as well, thinking about how we will maintain it, and knowing that that's going to be the most involved piece. So we did identify, after asking, putting the question out there to the partners, and of course, as expected, there were crickets in responses to that question. Well, would anyone like to take ownership of this responsibility? And then, of course, recognizing that everyone is at or beyond capacity. That said, behind the scenes here, we've been talking about, what would be, it's already going to be hosted on the Career Center's website, which is really maintained by the WIB staff. That ideally, if we were able to make it happen, to have the WIB staff also be the gatekeeper, or the air traffic controller, as we're also calling it in this project. So Katie Jo Kirkpatrick has willingly and graciously agreed to take on that role once the employer resource guide has been launched, to ensure that it's maintained properly moving forward. So does that answer your question, Dave, and address any of your concerns?
It does. Thanks. Sorry, I missed that point.
No, it's okay. We didn't spend a ton of time talking about it, so I think it's an important point to reemphasize. So I'll say it again, Katie Jo, thanks for helping us with that. We appreciate the support.
All right. Other questions about the resource guide? I know that there's been a tremendous amount of work, and it's often not even what goes in the guide, but it's the organizational coordination behind the scenes that provides the power. And I know there's been a lot of meetings and a lot of discussion, and it's great to see some of the shoots start to poke out of the ground on this. Good work by everybody. And if you send that link to us, Jason, we'll all provide some feedback as quickly as possible. Hearing no other discussion on this point, we'll move on. Operator and employer service highlights, Ellen and Corey.
Sorry, I couldn't figure out the mute there for a second. Can we go to awesome? So wanted to provide an update for virtual services. Many of you have seen the employer Facebook Lives that we started at probably in April now. We started that, and so it's been several months of that. We've had a lot of success. We actually did have a successful job placement from an employer that was featured in the Facebook Live, and so we were excited to see that happen, even though that's not traditionally what we would consider a hiring event, but it's great to be able to make that connection. We have employers scheduled on this through mid-July at this point, and are continuing to hear a demand from employers for that. So with that success in with featuring an employer, we also with the calls that are coming in for unemployment insurance, and the customers that are calling into the Career Center have started to see not just questions about their unemployment benefits, but also questions about that job search piece of things and other resources that might be available to them. So 3 weeks ago, we added a Facebook Live on Tuesday afternoons featuring a career coach, a talent development specialist with Brighton Center, Garrett Griffith. And he spends about, a half hour on Tuesday afternoons talking about the programs and resources that are available through the Career Center for job seekers. Separate from unemployment insurance. And so we've been able to feature Focus Career and the job search marketplace. We've been able to feature the Unemployment Bridge program, which is a benefit for mortgage assistance, which has been very, definitely something in need as customers are facing a reduction in their income, and then also our City Futures program. So we've seen a lot of success from that as well, and are utilizing that as an outreach opportunity for customers that we would normally see coming into the Career Center and being able to connect them to those resources. So in addition to that, we are partnering with the Kenton County Public Library for our Elevator Pitch Power Hour workshop. This is a workshop that is really geared towards networking and helping job seekers frame how they talk about themselves with employers, how they develop that kind of that 30-second pitch that allows them to really highlight their skills to employers. We've had 2 of those workshops now, and they've really been very successful. We've had over 50 participants in those workshops. So we're excited about that. A lot of our virtual workshops are seeing great attendance, and so it's one of those things that we think will carry forward even as we move into talking about what it looks like to return to some in-person services. Keeping a virtual aspect of these services is something that we're definitely looking at because we've been able to expand our audience for many of these. So included in that is our virtual resume workshop. We just were able to transition that curriculum to a virtual format this past month. And so we scheduled our monthly resume workshops. So really being able to, again, expand those services there. And then in terms of in-person services, several weeks ago, we had a food distribution in Grant County. Brighton Center has seen a 300% increase in their request for emergency services, such as food and hygiene items since the onset of coronavirus. And so we had a food distribution in Grant County in April, and we're still seeing a need for that. So we are planning another one next week. And also that just yesterday we had a food distribution in Owen County where we saw several hundred families through that. Can we go to the next slide, Jason?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. So, thinking about our business services, rapid response has been a hot topic since the onset of coronavirus. Since March, we have seen an increase in the WARN notices that we've received from employers that are facing layoffs. Over 800 affected workers since March. Just to give you some perspective, for the whole fiscal year so from July to currently, we've seen 1,000 affected workers. So the large chunk of those being obviously, within the last 3 months, which is just a huge jump in that, a huge spike in those numbers. On the good news is that some of the, many of those have been temporary layoffs. And so we have not had a lot of what we call our rapid response information sessions because many employers are hoping that those remain temporary layoffs, and we see it as good news that they have not switched those to permanent layoffs. That being said, we have held recently within the last 2 weeks, 2 rapid response sessions for local employers. One we were able to hold virtually via Zoom, and the other we held outdoors with, social distancing and following health and safety standards. We had over 100 job seekers attend both of those events combined. We've also made some changes to our local phone system to make it easier for employers to access the local services here. So with the onset of coronavirus, unemployment was the name of the game, but we wanted to make sure that our employers were able to still get in touch with a business service representative. And so we added through the Google Voice and Amazon Connect phone system, option 1 for employers, which we've had a lot of success with and have been able to maintain those services with employers through that. And then lastly, I'm really excited to talk about our virtual job fair. So in addition to our Facebook Lives, I did mention, that we are looking to get to a more traditional type of hiring event. And so we had to cancel our Veterans Job Fair, which would have been our 14th annual Veterans Job Fair in March. We had to cancel that, but we are excited to say that we have set a tentative date in July for that event, and to be able to hold that virtually so that we can keep our annual Veterans Job Fair. So we will be looking to do that via Zoom, and we're also researching some other platforms to be able to provide that service for job seekers and employers. And that is all. If there are any questions.
Thank you, Ellen, for the update. Questions regarding some of the highlights that Ellen went over? Ellen, I do have one question. You are interacting with companies that are laying off, at the same time helping to support hiring events. Is there any kind of trend in terms of which industries you see laying off and which industries you see hiring? I know it's probably non-scientific, but are there any trends out there that you're seeing firsthand?
So, it's definitely, like you said, non-scientific. Anecdotally, I would say the logistics companies are definitely still ramping up services. So that hub of Amazon, DHL, FedEx, all at that CVG campus, those employers really never experienced a slowdown. Obviously, our grocery, Kroger, manufacturing, and their warehousing were incredibly busy during this time, and they're an employer that we worked with a lot. They're have not experienced a slowdown. We did see a big dip at the CVG Career Center, obviously because of the impact to the airline industry. And we've had recent conversations that they're starting to see that pick up a little bit. Some passenger flights are starting to pick up, and so those employers are gradually coming back online. Definitely not up to full capacity, and I think what we're hearing is that will be a while before that comes up. Other than that, it seems, it's hard to pin down a trend other than those things. Definitely, some surprises in that we, with the healthcare industry, that's something you would think would be big, but due to stopping the, like non-essential procedures and things like that, we saw some kind of, strange trends in that. And some of those are starting to come back now as procedures come back online.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions for Ellen? Okay, moving on. Data. David.
Well, actually, Andy, I think Corey had a quick update he wanted to share as well.
Oh, I apologize. Sorry, Corey. I didn't see that.
No
Go
worries.
ahead.
Okay.
I thought we had wrapped up there. Go ahead, Corey.
No problem. I just had one slide. We have a few things happening here with our rural centers. As you all know, we've been in our current location in Williamstown for over 2 years now. It's served us well, and we've seen a lot of positive momentum in that center in terms of number of folks served. We really have seen exponential increases in terms of in-the-door customers coming into our career center in Williamstown. So on one hand, we hate to disrupt that momentum, but we see an opportunity to co-locate with NKU and Gateway by moving into the NKU Grant County Center, which is also in Williamstown. It's just about a half-mile south of our current location. This will be an opportunity to leverage each other's services. Of course, there's already a captive audience there, so to speak, of students coming in on a regular basis, but also with Gateway there on site, having their adult ed / skills U programming there. It's also an opportunity to integrate services with Gateway. So we see this as a great opportunity regarding service provision, but also it's a great way for us to cut back budgetarily. I think with the fewer dollars that are available now, this is going to help us financially. It's going to take us from about it's going to cut our expenses by about 100%, from about $10,000 to about $5,000 a year. So there's a couple of good reasons to make this transition down in Grant County. We hope to be in our new location in August. More to come on that. Working on the MOU as we speak here this afternoon. With Carrollton, a lot of the same situation in Carrollton. Again, we've seen a lot of good numbers in Carrollton, but it's a very costly location, and we're currently exploring other options. We really haven't nailed down any yet in Carrollton. If you have any suggestions, more than happy to talk with you about that. But just so that you know, we are currently exploring new options for an office location in Carrollton. Wanted to just highlight the fact that we're on the front end, I guess I'll say, of really deepening our engagement with employers, going beyond and we've already done this to a large degree already, but we continue to go beyond the hiring event, the more transactional interactions with employers, really wanting to deepen our engagement, help employers more with not only a talent attraction, but getting into the retention services. And so one example is we're beginning to connect with CovTech, and I've had conversations with the city of Covington to sort of get us in the door with CovTech. And for those, I'm guessing most of you are familiar, but that's the new development going into where the Latonia shopping plaza was. And it consists of two primary businesses, Regadget and Blair Technologies. They're moving into that space, and I believe they're going to have about 200,000 square foot. And so they're going to have room for other tech companies to move in. And this brings with it a whole bunch of opportunity for workforce services. They're going to be hiring some positions as a result of this move. And so on the front end of that, we want to be the number one resource that they access to help them with that workforce recruitment. And then finally, one of the things we've started working on recently is feedback from our employer customers. One of the things that's been glaring to me for a little while now is that our job seeker satisfaction rate has been very high, always in the high 90s. Recently, though, our employer satisfaction rate is hovered around 86%. And so I think a large part of that is that we're really limiting the opportunity for employers to give us feedback. Last year, we mainly just captured employer feedback during our 4 signature large job fairs. And while that's good feedback, there were some anomalies there. Employers are commenting on the food, the quality of the the different things that we don't have as much control over, and which is a big reason I believe that our satisfaction was only 86%. Now by increasing outreach and putting satisfaction surveys in front of employers more regularly, such as after our other types of events, such as Discover KCC, other hiring events, just basic services, such as Facebook Live, for example. We'll start sending employers satisfaction surveys after that experience. And we feel like by expanding that, we'll get more employer feedback. Then it'll be based on a wider array of our services. And we expect to see that satisfaction rate increase as a result, our goal being 97%. So more to come on that too. And that's all I had. Thanks.
Okay, great work. Thank you, Corey. Questions for Corey? All right. Thank you. I think now we're moving on to data analysis with David and Jason.
Yeah, I'll tee it off real quick, but I will give a lot of props to David. You know, as usual, he's really been extremely busy over the past few months, just gathering data to share with this group and many other groups as well, to see if we can really kind of drill down to the labor market effects since the pandemic began and really fast forwarding to present day. And so what we wanted to do first is just share what we normally share in terms of our board's key performance indicators. And typically this is something that's shared in a one-pager, but just for the purpose of formatting and through the PowerPoint presentation, we've broken it up in 3 different slides. And so it should still look familiar, hopefully, to you. So just as a recap, this is kind of our top section of our KPIs, which really focuses on the labor market needs of our area. And as you see, you know, the majority of this time period, we've seen really low unemployment rates, and we've seen relatively high labor participation rates, and with Northern Kentucky really outperforming from both the national and the state average. And then we come over to April, and that's when really everything just changed from a data perspective. And so we've seen the updates and we start seeing the drastic changes that occurred just in that short amount of time. So David, what else would you like to add on this particular slide?
Just real quick, because people were asking about Ellen, about employer engagement, that the job postings are pretty much on par for this time last year. So as far as like job postings in Focus and other venues, that hasn't really changed. And then, like you said, the LMI it's obvious. You know, when you look at February's numbers, we've lost over 30,000 in labor force alone. So in employment numbers alone. But you know, and labor participation rates are down, but that's all across the board.
Sure. So nothing surprising, I'm sure, to any of you in this meeting, but are there any questions on this particular section of our key performance indicators? Okay, thought I might have heard a question, so we'll move on to the next. And of course, if there are any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out even after today's meeting. We'd be happy to answer any specific questions that you might have. So the second slide is really that middle section of our key performance indicators, which really shows the action and the outputs of our team through the Career Center, and starting out with employer outreach by targeted sector, and then kind of drilling down a little bit more to some of those other outputs related to employer services, whether that be hiring events, job fairs, employers that have been actively participating, and rapid response, which is really the workforce reduction services and support that we provide, along with virtual tours. And then these bar graphs are really focusing on our Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act services, basic career services are really those universal services that are offered to job seekers. We're continuing to provide those in a virtual capacity, as mentioned previously. And then this next level, which we call individualized career services, that's really more of those intensive level services for customers, specifically job seekers that are needing some additional support. So we're running about even in terms of this time last year. We know that we're not going to see for the next few months, we're going to have more revealing information about how the pandemic has influenced or impacted these numbers, but we're not seeing too many outliers yet in these areas. And in fact, compared to this time last year, when we're talking about career training services, which those are the services that this board funds, they're grant dollars that we provide to individuals who are eligible, who have received individualized or intensive level career services and are on a pathway to receive or are actively receiving post-secondary training for a high demand career within one of our targeted sectors. And so those numbers are a little bit up compared to this time last year, along with our youth paid work experience program. So interesting data here. David, what else would you like to add to this?
Just that on this particular document, like the basic career services, those numbers have been flat since March because we don't track it the same way since COVID. I've gotten really good narratives from Mindy and Brendan, the Brighton Center staff in charge of youth and adult services. So when we do our year-end roll-up, there's going to be a good narrative portion to the data as well. And like Jason pointed out, though, the business services end is they're in overdrive. You know, we've already exceeded last year's numbers before the end of April. So by the end of June, we're going to be, 150, 200% of last year's numbers as far as business services. So that's all I have to add about this one.
Thanks, David. And then the final section of our KPIs really zeroes in on our Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act outcomes. And these, of course, are preliminary outcomes. And matching those preliminary outcomes with the goals specified for those areas. And so it's broken down in those three service categories of adults, which are typically adults that are determined to be priority of low income, and then dislocated workers, people who have been laid off from their jobs, and then our youth and young adults. And so as you see, our preliminary outcomes are also on track to meet or exceed those goal areas, which is promising. And then finally, in this section, we have some additional KPIs related to the number of applicant interviews, job placements, and then our customer satisfaction for both job seeker and employer customers. We know that our applicant interviews were trending lower along with job placements before the pandemic hit, and we know that the pandemic in the middle of March is also impacting these numbers as well. As effective as virtual services have been, we're seeing that from a connection to interview with employers and also job placement data that we receive from employers. That's been slow in terms of getting that verifiable data in. And I don't know, David, if you want to add anything to that component.
Just what you said, the numbers were kind of slowing down before COVID, but since then it's very difficult to get a lot of feedback from employers. And I kind of wanted to jump in real quick when Corey was talking about the employer satisfaction, because on here it's 100%. That's because we had started a pilot with the Discover KCC and having more like direct access to the employer surveys by the employers. And in the pilot program that we ran for that month, we got 100% satisfaction rate from, I'll admit, a small pool of responses. But that's the number we're going to go into FY21 with. We're going to start it off at 100% and see how it goes from there. Should stay at that, right?
Yeah. So nice segue, David, into the employers. That's the next thing I wanted to mention in terms of data is that this new survey format, which was recently developed in just last month, it features a streamlined questionnaire, really similar to what you would see in an Amazon online review. For the sake of time, I won't take you there, but we're going to provide, in addition to the link to the employer resource guide, we'll also follow up to this group with a link to the survey, and we'll provide you with the whole PowerPoint from today's meeting as well, so you have that in case you need to reference it. But it's a star rating system, so 5-star ratings or up to 5-star rating system, and so in addition to that, it's also more of a universal type of survey versus a survey that was tied to a specific event like a job fair or hiring event. And so this provides us with a little more flexibility on how we utilize this survey. It also offers a bilingual option particularly for Spanish customers or Spanish speaking customers. And then as David mentioned, we already have launched this survey at the recent Discover KCC Employer Experience, and that went quite well. So we'll include this link for you all to review, and we'd love if you had any feedback or suggestions to hear from you. And I believe there might have been a question from Dave Fleischer, and my apologies, I don't have to, let's see if I can pull that up, Dave.
March to today.
If you look at the period from March to today as a separate trend, having these rolled into the year-to-date does not help see any emerging trend. Oh, David, what do you think about that?
I'm not sure which part are you talking about in particular, the business service?
I was looking at the page 2. If you could scroll back to page 2. So if I'm interpreting this correctly, across the top, the outreach programs are kind of going crazy. It looks like we've exceeded every goal. Is that correct?
We have, yeah.
However,
it's hard to show that with the dots.
Yeah, I understand. But then when we look at page 3, we see that we aren't, it looks like there's not enough hiring going on, or the hiring is very slow as businesses start to come back up to speed, right?
Yeah, the hiring was slowing down a little bit before COVID.
Okay, I guess what I'm trying to do is how do we make our customers, the job seekers, more competitive in getting these jobs? If those jobs are out there, I think what we see is when we were at 3% unemployment, the employers were looking for anybody that could pass a drug screen, breathe oxygen, and show up to work every day. Okay, they were not as particular or picky as they could be. Today, with unemployment at the higher rate and business coming back slowly, our job seekers are probably under a lot more scrutiny. So how do we make them competitive? And will looking at any of this data help give some direction to the Career Center or to the related agencies to be a little bit more nimble than trying to understand where this is in a year-to-date type of number?
Right. And I think that's an excellent point, David, that I've made a note of. If I can also add, these the data elements and applicant interviews and job placements, these are heavily dependent upon the feedback and the information from employers. And so that is another challenge that we've seen. Well, we've seen that challenge for a long time, but we've seen it in this particular program year. We've seen it really begin to be even more of a challenge, even before the pandemic really hit us. But since the pandemic, it's been really slow in terms of that critical feedback from employers. So that I will just add that part that I don't consider these areas actual numbers. They've always been kind of conservative in terms of what we know is actually happening, but this verifiable information that we depend upon from the employers to share with us. So David, I don't know if I expressed that to your satisfaction, but
well, Jason, if you don't mind, let me just ask this. these numbers and these KPIs are primarily to let us know as a board how we're doing and what we need to do to help improve our employers and our job seekers situation.
Sure.
We need to be really focused on what's going on right now. This is really a critical point. And if we're talking about activities that are critical between now or from March until now, and as somebody said, maybe we relapse and we have more shutdowns going on as the virus comes back. I just think the sharper we can get these numbers to help us make critical decisions, the better it's going to be.
Yep. Totally agree. Totally agree.
Yeah, and Dave,
just a comment, that's all. Sorry.
So Dave, I think that if I'm understanding your comment too, the first page of this does a good job of showing the change in trend because it shows the individual months. And as you get to the bottom half of this report, once you lump in the last 3 months with the previous 6, it doesn't really tell a story or one that's particularly actionable. So, I mean, I think that that's something that we can talk about and work on. And I think, David and has provided a very good look at why some of these changes are happening. But I agree with you. I think that we're going to have to start to look at our new reality and not get clouded by the 6 months that is completely different than what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think the data is tremendous, and David, your work is phenomenal, and Jason, your direction is super. But these are strange times that we're in.
Totally. I get it.
Okay.
And
all right.
Well, if there are opportunities for us to make some of these updates prior to the executive committee and also the full WIB meeting, we'll make sure that those updates are reflected so that as it's vetted, this is the group that always vets this information first before it goes to the full board. So your feedback's invaluable. Thank you, David. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, I think, Jason, at a minimum, as you get to the bottom half of this report, at least in the explanation of it, pulling out, at least talking about what is different in each of these categories over the last 3 months. Because, what David said, we're off the charts in terms of employer engagement. And that's happened because of what's been going on in the last 3 months, whereas some of these other things the data's kind of washed out because it's getting, I just think explaining that to the full board would be really good.
Yep, totally.
All right. Anything else on the data front, Jason, David?
So I'm gonna, and again, we'll follow up with you, this group, and provide you with the PowerPoint of some of these other data elements because we wanted to share. For the sake of time, we won't dive into this deeply today, but we do have some additional information in terms of unemployment insurance or unemployment rates by industry and affected workers. And we've got some highlights from Boone, Kenton, and Campbell County. We've also got, this is an interesting piece of data we thought that you all would appreciate, is this shows a breakdown of 20 different sectors, industries, and it shows the percentage of the workers within those industries and how much they are actually, their benefits, their state benefits, and also the pandemic benefits through the CARES Act are exceeding their regular wages. So we thought you all would find that information helpful and really providing some perspective, as well as our national labor market data for the last jobs report that came out in May. We saw that although there was a decrease in the unemployment rate, the jobs that rose by 2.5 million were not brand new jobs necessarily. In fact, most of those jobs were restored jobs as employers called back their workforce that was laid off from previous months. There's also a statement that I just copied and pasted from that jobs report that shows how there was a misclassification error in the report as well. So even though there was some were celebrating that the unemployment rate was lower, it may not be completely as low as we think. So that information, along with the link to the full report, will be in the PowerPoint as well. So again, for the sake of time, I wanted to just kind of just provide brief highlights about that.
Thank you, Jason. Questions about some of the national data and state data as it relates to our current unemployment situation? All right, thank you both. We'll turn to partnership. Tara.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'm just going to scoot over here. I've been attempting to follow the chat and let people in as they come in and out. So can you see me okay, Andy, from if I'm sitting right here? So we're still fully distanced. Okay, great. I want to make sure that we provide enough time for our final update, but I did have a couple of updates that I just wanted to make sure that we had time to share with the group. I did have one additional thing that came up as I was looking at, I think it was originally Michelle's comment, and we've talked about it a couple of times throughout this meeting with the potential uptick in the fall and the need to be aware that, even if we're trying to restore in-person services, that we might, need to fall back on these virtual services as well. And I just want to echo something that Corey had said about, I think Ellen did too, about there's a number of these things that we've found to be very successful in terms of the Facebook events that have been hosted by Haley from Brighton Center, and then also by Garrett, and some of the other virtual things that have happened via email. I just wanted to let you all know that we are also looking at additional virtual products that we might be able to bring into our set of resources to be able to serve all of our clients, both employers and job seekers. And they mentioned that there is going to be a virtual job fair for veterans in July. That one is going to be hosted via Zoom, and we're all working to figure out exactly what that's going to look like. But we have reached out to try to determine if we could potentially access virtual job fair resources, an actual platform that's designed for that use, because I think Zoom is going to be great compared to what we have, which is nothing else. But, it's not exactly designed for that purpose. And so I have, we just talked about potential partnership with other areas. And so I did just want to let you all know that I have spoken with Sherry Marshall from the Southwest Ohio WIB, as well as some of my counterparts with other Kentucky WIBs, such as Dr. Robert Boone in Bowling Green, just to determine what potential partnerships might be out there in terms of accessing some of these virtual platforms, which do tend to be quite pricey. It's just like creating a website, except for even more complicated. So I did just want to let you all know that those conversations are happening both on the partnership side and on the looking long-term about what additional virtual services that we might be able to access. So just a quick update on that, and then I'll go into what I was planning to say, which was I did want to provide an update, and I don't have any slides. This is just more of a, well, there's the director's report slide, but there's really not any. Oh, Corey provided the slide. Okay. That's fine. We're not quite there yet at all. So can we just go back so I can see everybody? I don't know if that's possible. Maybe it's not. This is fine. So you may have heard that unemployment insurance is transitioning to the labor cabinet. Unemployment insurance in Kentucky has always, and it looks like we're getting a chat maybe, but I don't think it's relevant. Unemployment insurance has always been in the workforce cabinet. Someone somewhere said returning to the labor cabinet, but we did a little looking. There's a WIB director in Western Kentucky who's been there for 40 years, and she says that in her career it has never been in the labor cabinet, but We had originally heard that the timing of that transition was going to be more like July 1st or July 15th. But I'm actually seeing public comments coming out from the Labor Cabinet today with some of the unemployment protests that have been happening in Frankfurt. So it looks like that transition is well on its way. We were briefed last week by Deputy Secretary of Workforce and Education, Josh Benton, about this transition. And, you know, it's very uncertain exactly what is this going to mean for the way that we're able to align with unemployment. So we're watching this very closely, because as we have definitely been interested in branding and defining ourselves as employment services and the career center, we, you know, rather than the unemployment office, we also know that the people that are on unemployment, the dislocated workers that we're serving, they need help sometimes filling out their forms, and especially people that maybe have limited access to technology, or maybe they have a disability that makes it a little harder for them to do that on their own. You know, in the last fiscal year prior to COVID, we had about 17,800 people in the door. About 4,000 of them came in because they felt like they needed some kind of help with UI. And so while we certainly want to make sure that we're focusing on the employment side, we know that we need to make sure that we're aligned with unemployment. And so I did want to let you all know that that transition is happening. We have some concerns, and so we will continue monitoring that and letting you know if there's something that we might need the board to do, or just to keep you updated on that. I did also want to let you know, when we talk about restoring in-person services, if you have not seen Twitter or the news today, there was a line that was actually created originally yesterday. There was a protest, and state employees came out and started helping those protesters handle their unemployment claims, which was a very well-intentioned effort. This morning, they said that they'd be back tomorrow. Today's tomorrow. People started lining up well early in the morning. By 9 a.m., they had to cut off the line because they didn't think that they were going to be able to get through it by the end of the day. Estimates were that it was going to be about an 8-hour wait for the people toward the end of the line. And there is some footage that I saw from the Herald Leader that was on Twitter about showing people winding actually into the neighborhood in Frankfurt. It was just a very long line, no social distancing, very few masks. And so I just wanted to reiterate that I think that the team, both the Brighton Center team, Jason, as well as the other partners that are involved in the Career Center, are really taking this restoring of in-person services very, very seriously. We want to open the resource room, especially for those individuals that do not have access to either consistent broadband service or to a computer to do those job searches. But we also want to make sure that we don't have a public health situation on our hands. So did just want to let you all know that I think that the seriousness that they're all taking this of restoring those services is important, because we think that we might be inundated, and we know that we're not going to have UI staff there present to be able to answer people's questions, and that's gonna cause additional problems as well. Let's see. I know we're running low on time. You might want to mute if you haven't already, but I just want to point your attention to, I've been sending weekly updates due to the very quickly evolving situation. Eventually these may decrease back to monthly updates, but I do think it's important for you all to know what's going on at this time. So those are called At a Glance. I send them just from my personal or from my work email. So if you ever have any questions about those, we don't ever put anything in there that's not shareable. So if you ever wanted to share it with your team or with your office or anywhere, you're certainly welcome to do that. And finally, very pleased to report that I have been having some conversations with Lisa Mulcahy at GROW about better aligning our efforts, and specifically about the potential for you, our WIB members, to be able to engage with the GROW work without actually having to join another committee. And so we've spoken to Andy about this, and Andy, thank you for your insights. Also spoken, like I said, to Lisa Mulcahy. I will acknowledge that I don't know exactly what this is going to look like moving forward, but we think it's really important and very fitting for GROW to have more employer engagement. This group obviously has a lot of employer engagement, and so we really want to make sure that we have a chance to really align those two things. And so we're going to start today with an update from Corey, who starts as GROW's Pillar 3 lead, specifically about GROW, and then in the future we'll move forward and we'll kind of see what that looks like. So we would love to have your feedback after this input, after this update, or just in the future about what you'd like to see about that further and better alignment. Corey?
Thanks, Chair, and I'll be very concise. I know we're over on time. Some of you may already know our overarching goal of Pillar 3, our adult career readiness and lifelong learning pillar, is to increase the supply of qualified workers to improve regional labor force participation rate, which aligns perfectly with the work of the Workforce Investment Board. And we would certainly value added voices from our regional employers around this table. And so to Tara's point, I think it would be outstanding if we could have more, I don't want to say participation, because like she said, we're not asking anybody to join an additional committee, but it would be, I would highly value the input from this committee in particular when it relates to our Pillar 3 work. Just a quick overview of our two objectives, and I kind of pared this down. They're a little bit more wordy, and if you really want to get into the action items, but we're trying to accomplish our overarching goal by two major buckets: increasing attainment of post-high school credentials, and you can see some of our strategies there in order to do that. And then our second objective is to improve awareness and communication of resources for individuals, partners, and employers. And we've already talked some today about the Digital Employer Resource Guide, and this committee has heard several times about the Northern Kentucky Workforce Partner Roundtable. Both of those efforts are contributing to Objective 2. Right now, this pillar overall is meeting on a quarterly basis as a large group. We actually met earlier this morning. And then we have subcommittees in place to focus on Objective 1, a subcommittee for Objective 1, and a separate subcommittee for Objective 2 to make sure we're really focusing on all of these efforts to move the work forward. I think that's all, unless you had any questions.
So Corey, Tara, it sounds like you, from a structural perspective, would like to take advantage of the employers that we have around the table with BSC to provide input and feedback on the work that this pillar is doing. So kind of an overlap with GROW Pillar 3. Is that a simplified way to?
Yes.
So with that, it sounds like maybe we want to structure future agendas in a way that if there are GROW relevant items for Pillar 3, they always have a home on the BSC agenda. Does that sound like the direction that you're trying to move here?
It is. And Andy, I mean, for example, in this meeting, you already spent some time looking at the Employer Resource Guide,
Right?
Element of the Pillar 3 agenda. So this is not really necessarily a new thing. It's just being more intentional and obvious about the fact that these groups are so compatible already.
And so therefore, as GROW is doing their work, if they have things in this pillar that they want to send to us for feedback, we'll have a home for them.
Correct.
Okay.
Hopefully, vice versa, anyone on this committee who sees an opportunity and wants to elevate that up into the GROW world, that will be an opportunity as well.
Okay, great. So, for example, if there's a advocacy or a state policy issue or something along those lines that affect this committee, we have a direct line of connection to the GROW platform, which can be more more of an advocate in Frankfurt quite frankly, than the ad in the WIB can. So we'll keep that channel of communication open.
Yeah, I just saw Dave's message about, should we report to Grow or should Grow report directly?
Grow report directly.
Yeah, and I would say in this case, I mean, Corey being the lead of Pillar 3, we feel like that is Grow reporting directly, but absolutely, if you all want to hear directly from Lisa occasionally or some other, I mean, several of the pillars are going to relate very directly to this committee, not only Pillar 3. So we'd be happy to mix it up with, the right person for the right topic when that comes up.
What I tend to agree that Corey is the perfect conduit into Pillar 3. However, I do think that sometimes to hear the message directly from Lisa or the Pillar lead is really super important for the BSC so that there's no misinterpretation. I also think it makes Grow a little bit more accountable for some of their directions and strategies if they have to at least run them past the BSC or the WIB in some manner. I liked what Andy said about maybe a regular type of report, not every time, but at least some face-to-face from time to time would be good too.
Great. Yeah, we can absolutely make that happen.
Okay. Well, I think that's moving in the right direction. We have a comment from Rhonda that she said she's also available to provide a high-level overview of the Grow pillars because she does that to the Chamber Executive Committee every month. So Rhonda is another member of this committee that can help us understand the larger Grow context as we move forward. Appreciate that, Rhonda.
Absolutely. And to Rhonda's point, so many of this group are involved in some way, which is another reason that it really makes a lot of sense for this group to have this conversation. So thank you very much, Rhonda, for that.
All right. Thank you, Tara. I think that we are out of time on our agenda. Jason, you had PY18 monitoring update. Is this something we can handle in a minute or less, or can we put this on the next agenda?
It's yes, we can handle it very quick. Can you hear me okay?
Go for it.
Okay, thank you. Real quick, we had a closing session with the state last Friday. Overall, the state monitoring feedback and draft report was good. So there were no findings. So this is intended to be more of a technical assistance exercise. So we will report on that in more detail in the coming days. But that's just the brief overview or mention that we wanted to make about that topic, and that's it.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Jason about monitoring? Any other questions, discussions, go to the group before we adjourn today? A lot going on. Just really appreciate how flexible and the staff has been to adjust to all of the different changes that have gone on in our world, and you all are right in the middle of it. Anything else anybody from the committee would like to add today?
So I will add one final thing, Andy, and I just want to say thank you. I know this is your final meeting, your final Business Services Committee meeting as chairperson. So I want to say a big thank you to you and your leadership on this committee, the first go around and the second go around as well. So a big thank you to you. I know there's going to be some, you have some additional meetings that are coming up. So it won't be your last WIB related meeting, but this is your last Business Services Committee meeting. So thank you. I just wanted to express that appreciation to you.
I appreciate it. It's my pleasure. It's an honor to be associated with y'all. So, so much fun. We did it twice, right? Well, anything else for the good of the group? All right. Well, you all have a great afternoon and evening. And I think we'll look forward to the full WIB meeting coming up here in a couple weeks. And in the meantime, feel free to reach out if there are any other questions. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.